getting states to be able to hold and buy Bitcoin today, other than just that you have to write the law and pass it, right? So we are actively working with states across the country. And also, this is the exciting part, is we've gotten so much inbound and so much excitement around this policy idea that we have other countries reaching out. Lawmakers across the world have started pinging us and saying, hey, we want your help.
This episode is brought to you by Gemini, which is one of the top crypto exchanges in the industry. I've been a user of Gemini for many years. They make it easy for you to buy, sell, and trade crypto. Gemini has a lot of unique features. They have a fully functional app, a credit card, they include staking on their platform, and they also have a stablecoin called Gemini Dollar, which is USD backed. And Gemini is certified, regulated, and licensed. They are available in 70 plus countries. And if you sign up using my code or link, which will be in the description, you can get $15 in Bitcoin when you trade your first $100. So if you'd like to learn more about Gemini, visit the link in the description. Welcome into the Thinking Crypto podcast. I'm your host, Tony Edward, and my guest today is Dennis Porter, who is the CEO and co-founder of the Satoshi Action Fund. Dennis, great to have you on.
Always good to be with you, Tony. Thanks for having me back on.
Dennis, a lot's happening. I've been following your tweets. We got the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve Bill in motion. There's a lot of dialogue and talks happening, not only in the United States, but around the world. A lot of questions. But before we get there, tell us about yourself, where you're from, and what's your professional background.
Yeah, so happy to be here. A little bit about myself. I found Bitcoin in 2017. And I quickly fell in love with the technology. First someone told me that it was perfectly anonymous internet money. And I said, that's not possible. Nothing on the internet is perfectly anonymous. And so I started to study Bitcoin so that I could prove my friend wrong. Nothing better than, proving someone wrong. That's a favorite pastime of mine. But when I was in there, I learned quickly there were so many things I loved about Bitcoin. I ended up proving my friend wrong, of course, because Bitcoin is not perfectly anonymous internet money, although there are significant privacy enhancements. But while I was in there trying to prove my friend wrong, I found so many things about the technology that I did love. I loved this ability of Bitcoin to be able to bank the unbanked, to provide financial services for those that have been left behind, and quickly began to just throw everything, all my time at Bitcoin so I could learn more about it. Started mining Bitcoin out of my basement. I was going to go all in on Bitcoin mining. It was like the top of the 2017 bull market. So luckily, I did not throw all of my time and energy behind building a mine at that moment in time, because weeks later the market crashed. So from that, I learned, I don't know enough about Bitcoin to be able to throw all my money, all my time at it. So let me learn more about this technology. And so for a few years, I just kind of silently learned, read every book out there, Bullish Case for Bitcoin, all the Andreas Antonopoulos books, Bitcoin Standard, you name it. And eventually in 2020, 2021, going into that last bull market that we had, I saw it kind of coming back. I saw Saylor jumping in and I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. It's coming back. I didn't prepare enough for this moment. And so what I did was I said, I got to just do whatever I can to do something in the Bitcoin space now before this market takes off. So I launched a podcast, got into the media space, started to talk a lot about Bitcoin, got really popular for talking about Bitcoin. Eventually, I was one of the first on Twitter Spaces to talk about Bitcoin. That really blew up. I used Twitter Spaces quite effectively with my good friend Mike Alfred back in the day. But over some time, I realized that there was a real strong need to be able to get involved politically for Bitcoin. I grew up in a family where politics was a kitchen table issue. We were always talking about politics nonstop all the time. I grew up personally in a conservative family when I was very young. Today, I find myself to be much more in the middle, but grew up in this very conservative family, listening to Rush Limbaugh and Hannity on talk radio all the time, right? So this was a constant conversation. I'd always wanted to be in politics. Never really found a great way to get in, tried a few different times, went to some trainings, helped on some campaigns, helped with some advocacy stuff, but nothing ever really fit. But eventually I just saw there was such a desperate need for us to become politically active in the Bitcoin space to protect from the worst types of possible outcomes, to protect against bans, to protect against crazy amounts of taxation on Bitcoin. And I was hearing that that fear wasn't just one that I had of my own. I was talking to a lot of other friends in the space and they had that same type of fear. And I just kept, on my podcast, on Twitter Spaces, yelling that we need to be politically active. Well, eventually a really, really big attack came on Bitcoin and in the infrastructure bill. And that's when I think the political momentum really started to pick up. Eventually, I ended up finding my two co-founders, and we launched Satoshi Action Fund in June of 2022, and we've been off of the races ever since. We've got four bills we've passed into law. We've got 30 bill plus introductions in 20 plus states. We have sent letters to over 200,000 lawmakers across this entire country. Every single lawmaker in this country has gotten a letter from someone who has used our tools to send letters. Just so many big wins that we've been able to secure on top of the peer-reviewed research that we've been able to produce. A lot of people they say there's all this misinformation around Bitcoin, and they'll write a blog about it. They'll go on a podcast about it. I love that. We need more of that. That's how you educate the sort of average person in the world. They listen to that kind of stuff. But lawmakers, they don't really listen to blogs. They don't use it as a source of truth. They want to see real, credible, evidence-backed research back up the claims that are made about Bitcoin. And that's why in 2023, we launched Satoshi Action Education. We brought on an extremely tenured, super successful academic to help us to craft these papers that we produce about Bitcoin, supporting the claims we make. We've done over a dozen papers. 6 of those have made it into peer-reviewed journals. 1 was in a top 2% journal. So that is what has really helped us to lay the groundwork for combating a lot of the FUD, the misinformation, and just flat out lies about Bitcoin. And that has also helped drive the conversation to help get more legislation across the finish line. But I've told people a little bit about what I've done. And coming up, though, in 2025 is what we're about to do is pass strategic Bitcoin reserve legislation into law across the country. We have 10 plus states looking at this legislation. We've already made the introduction in Pennsylvania. We are the first in history to do that. And we're looking forward to being able to get states in the US to buy Bitcoin for the first time in 2025.
That's amazing. What a journey, Dennis. And the timeliness of you deciding, you and your co-founder deciding to start the Satoshi Action Fund and not knowing, the hurdles and the fight that was coming along with Elizabeth Warrens and all these people going against Bitcoin and the crypto industry. And a lot of credit to you and the team there, man. You guys got a lot done. I follow you on Twitter. I see a lot of the research and the bills and much more. And that's really great work because a lot of people talk, but not a lot of people do. And I'm really amazed by the work you guys have done. So incredible stuff, man.
Thank you, Tony. I appreciate that. For us at our core, it's all about proof of work. It's all about driving real results for Bitcoin. Because as you said, there's a lot of people that talk and they don't produce real tangible results, or it's just intangible. And that's fine, right? We need people working behind the scenes that, aren't out in the forefront to produce wins for Bitcoin. There's a lot of people like that. But for us as an organization, in order to get funded as a nonprofit, it's critical that we have real, achievable, provable wins that we can demonstrate to the public. We've done that with the 4 bills we passed into law, the 6 pieces of peer-reviewed research. That's irrefutable evidence that we have been able to be successful. The reason why also proof of work is so important to us as an organization is because when we launched in June of 2022, that was like right in the middle of the FTX collapse. I mean, it was brutal out there.
Yeah.
There was no way to raise money. No one was looking at us going, okay, yeah, I'm going to give this brand new upstart nonprofit money that's led by this guy who just came out of the media space to do political work, who has no legitimate political experience. Like I have some, but I wasn't passing bills or like moving the needle in any specific way. I'm not going to give this guy money while I'm trying to struggle to like make ends meet in the middle of this bear market because of FTX collapsing. So right away, I told the team, I said, listen, we got to go out and we have to produce results. The only way that people are going to donate us in this tough time is if we're really showing that we're going to put those dollars to work. And so we feel proud to know that we have been able to help our donors to be able to be extremely effective in advocating for Bitcoin. That's what we really see ourselves as an extension of our donors. We have many different donors, small, medium, large companies, individuals who support what we're doing. And we, take as a pride of we take it as a very important point to make sure we're securing wins and using that money effectively for them.
Let's talk about the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve and this dialogue that's happening. So you guys are, of course, working on the state level. Pennsylvania introduced that bill. When you're pitching these folks or talking to them about it, How is their mindset? Are they more open to it now than maybe years ago? Because let's say the ETFs are here, Bitcoin has gone more mainstream and so forth.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it couldn't be more different than when we started.
Mm.
When we started Satoshi Action, it was constant outreach. We are always on the hunt for lawmakers that would even just take a meeting with us, to be honest.
Mm.
Like today it's completely different. Back then we had to grind out these meetings. We had to fly in to meet people just to have a conversation about having a bill introduction. Today, lawmakers are reaching out to us.
Wow.
They're hitting me up and they're sliding into my DMs, right? And they are asking us for help. They are filling out the contact form on our satoshiaction.io website. They're finding me at conferences and saying, hey, we want to work with you. We want to be able to introduce legislation. And there is no piece of legislation that's more exciting than the strategic Bitcoin reserve policy. And that's why, we're pushing very hard to get this out there as much as we possibly can. So to give some context, though, we have been working on this type of legislative effort for 2+ years, almost the entire time Satoshi Action has existed, 2.5 years, 3 years now. But I also personally have been working to get states to adopt Bitcoin for 4+ years
Mm.
here in the US. I was pushing really hard for the legal tender stuff in the early days.
Right.
Back then we kind of realized that wasn't going to happen. That was a bridge too far. But this new legislative concept of having states buy Bitcoin and hold Bitcoin is something that is 100% achievable. There is legal tender. People would say it's not possible. Theoretically, that's maybe true. There certainly is an avenue. It's just really, really hard to get there. You have to do some like constitutional changes to be able to get there.
Right.
But there is no constitutional law. Nothing in the way of getting states to be able to hold and buy Bitcoin today, other than just that you have to write the law and pass it, right? So we are actively working with states across the country. And also, this is the exciting part, is we've gotten so much inbound and so much excitement around this policy idea that we have other countries reaching out. Lawmakers across the world have started pinging us and saying, hey, we want your help. And the great part is about it is it's not just that we have these lawmakers reaching out. There's other groups. There are advocacy groups all across this world who care deeply about Bitcoin. Fortunately, in the US, we're in a great position because we're a big country with a lot of industry, a lot of donors. I think the US citizens hold more Bitcoin than any country in the world at this point. So a lot of money here. It's, a little easier to fundraise than it would be internationally. I try to put in context for people. I say, okay,
Sure.
imagine if you go to Rhode Island. Rhode Island is very small, not a lot of industry there. And you just said, I just want to raise money for Rhode Island. I just want to help Rhode Island get across the finish line. There's just not going to be a lot of people that have enough money to build this huge advocacy effort in the state of Rhode Island because there's just not enough interest there. Now, some countries are the same size and have the same GDP as Rhode Island. So imagine being someone who really knows how to get things done in another part of the world, but you just don't have the ability to put the resources together to fund that effort. And so what we're doing is we're actually dropping in and saying, hey, we have the model, the strategy, the infrastructure, the policy ideas to inject into what you already have going on. Because there's people that know the system, they have the relationships to get policy across the finish line all across the world. They just don't have that critical piece of funding that is needed to accelerate their work. So it's a very exciting time. We are moving very dramatically in the right direction. And we have policy moving in the right direction all across this country. And to go back to the original question, the dialogue that's taking place, it's just so different from before. It used to be grind, get a phone call, grind, get a bill introduction. And then, maybe you get lucky on passing these things. That system has inverted. Ever since the election, it's nonstop inbound that we're getting. We don't even reach out to lawmakers anymore because it's too much. We have too many lawmakers reaching out to us. At this point, we just need to raise more money to be able to help pass these bills into law. And that's why we're launching our $500,000 match fundraising effort. So we have $250,000 in match donations that people are going to give us so that we can get to our $500,000 goal so that we can pass all this legislation into law. So if anybody wants to donate to Satoshi Action, they can donate $1. It gets matched $1 to $1 up to $250,000. So you can double your impact in helping us to be able to advocate for Bitcoin.
That's amazing. I love it. And folks, I'll put link to the Satoshi Action Fund's website so you can go check that out. Dennis, with regards to these states and the ability for them to hold Bitcoin, are you offering up the ETF or can they buy Bitcoin and hold it with a custodian?
Absolutely. Yeah, we love, we thought for a while they would only do ETFs, but there's a lot of interest in having them hold it directly through a custodial solution, self-custodial solution, or also someone that can hold it on their behalf as well, like an exchange or a registered agent. So we definitely want to create a pathway for states to actually buy Bitcoin and hold real Bitcoin. We think that that puts them in the absolute best position,
Mm.
especially in those fringe economic cases where we have really bad outcomes. Um, so we do want states to be able to buy Bitcoin directly and hold Bitcoin directly. And also, we really support Senator Lummis's bill. Senator Lummis has this really great piece of legislation at the federal level, which does the exact same thing. It
Right.
allows the U.S. government to hold Bitcoin, but also the great thing about Senator Lummis's office is they care a lot about the states. And, you know, we're working sort of in parallel. We're doing our state work, she's doing her federal work. But even in doing her federal work, she created a pathway for states to be able to have their own segregated wallet to buy and hold Bitcoin as well. So we love what Senator Lummis is doing. We really support it. And we think there's a real opportunity to get something across the finish line for states and the federal government to actually hold Bitcoin.
Mm. To your point of international or countries globally are contacting you about this, do you think Donald Trump coming out and endorsing this Bitcoin strategic reserve idea kind of kicked off a bit of game theory here? No one wants to get left behind.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, listen, when the next president of the United States is trying to do something, people are going to listen no matter who that person is. And so certainly it did have a big impact. But I think also just the general outcome of the election had a big impact because a lot of pro Bitcoin people won their races. And some of them won their races, I would say, in large part because of the position that their opponent took on
Yeah.
Bitcoin. And there's no better case than this than Sherrod Brown in Ohio. Sherrod Brown is the chair of Senate banking. He was a powerful member of the Senate, and he is gone now, almost exclusively because of his opposition to Bitcoin. Now, Trump probably could have won with or without his Bitcoin support. It was a big enough win where adding in, 100,000 new voters or 200,000 new voters probably didn't get him across the finish line. It was a collection of things. But Sherrod Brown, I mean, it's really hard to come up with any other answer other than that he opposed Bitcoin and crypto writ large. He was like a direct ally, if not like partners in crime with Elizabeth Warren to be able to oppose this industry, and I say that, I don't say that with like a happy heart that Elizabeth Warren is like against Bitcoin. She should be one of the biggest supporters of Bitcoin in the entire world. Like she is very pro consumer. She loves to protect people. She's very anti big bank. She's very anti fraud. She's very pro regulation. The funny part is people don't realize so Bitcoin is one of the most highly regulated monetary units in the entire world.
Yeah.
It's self-regulated though. And so that's why it's hard to sometimes for government and regulators to get their mind around it because it doesn't need as much regulation. It's already internally regulated. If you just to put it in context, Bitcoiners are probably already like, what the hell is this guy talking about? I'll tell you right now, Bitcoin is one of the most highly regulated monetary units in the entire world. All you need to look at is two really important rules. There's rules all over Bitcoin. You'll look at it, it's filled with rules. But we regulate the crap out of how much Bitcoin there can be. There can only ever be 21 million Bitcoin forever, permanently.
Mm.
Super regulated. We regulate the hell out of the block size. I mean, it's so hotly regulated. We fought a war over it, and the pro regulation camp won. So, folks like Elizabeth Warren, this is a message to you. You should be a big Bitcoin supporter. Bitcoiners would open up arms, I think, to you if you really were to come around to Bitcoin. So, needless to say, going back to Sherrod Brown, he lost his race because of his opposition to Bitcoin. And I think that that really changed the tide for a lot of people in Congress because they said, oh, wow, I can go win. Sherrod Brown's office, that's a pinnacle. That's like what people fight their whole lives for and their careers for to get to that point. Chair of Senate Banking's powerful Senate committee in the Senate. That's a huge deal as well. In Ohio, where it's an important state in the entire global economy, in the entire U.S. economy.
Mm.
But opposes Bitcoin and he's gone. I mean, that's the kind of thing that sends shivers down the spines of politicians. I think that's going to really result in quite a lot of many members of Congress, and many members at the state level are going to start turning and saying, "Wow, why would I stand against Bitcoin? And look at it, it does all these great things, and if I oppose it, someone's going to come in and just make me lose my entire office just because of my opposition." So Trump certainly made a difference on how this conversation is taking place, but those members of Congress, powerful members of Congress, losing their seat because their opposition to Bitcoin is another big one as well.
Yeah, look, I'm an independent, but I can't. The Elizabeth one, I think, screwed over the Democrats big time, and that's not the main issue in the whole political realm, of course. But crypto was the biggest spender in this election cycle, and why would you go against a neutral technology? Why would you form an army? And I'm going to go against it. It's one thing to say, hey, I think this could be regulated better. Okay, but you make it a political item, and then your opponent uses it against you in a chess move, and here we are. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's a different time, because even 4 years ago, maybe even 2 years ago, the previous election, Bitcoin was not a winning issue, but now it is. Because there's a bunch of reasons why. One is because there is way more people that support Bitcoin today than there ever has been.
Mhm.
I think about roughly 1 in 7 Americans owns some form of digital assets. The vast majority of them being Bitcoin. This industry is extremely well capitalized. So you have, many of the latest and greatest billionaires are all from the crypto industry, Bitcoin industry, and they are waking up and realizing, oh my gosh, I need to dump money into the political space because these guys are they're going to criminalize me. They're going to put me out of business. And so a lot of people are spending incredible amounts of money. I'm not a big money in politics guy, but at the end of the day, that's the system that we have, and that's the system that's in place.
Mhm.
And the crypto industry, the Bitcoin industry has realized they need to be spending if they want to protect themselves. And that spending has really ramped up. I mean, I was telling people, if you want to be effective, there has to be some spending. There's a certain point when spending there's diminishing returns.
Right.
But if you're not spending at all, that's not good. And for a while, that was where we were at.
Yeah, I remember.
Today,
Sorry.
the last comment today, it's vastly different. The digital asset ecosystem accounts for over 50% of all super PAC money in just this cycle. We beat the Koch brothers, we beat oil and gas, we beat the military. That's insane. Now, if you go back 10 years, we're second place over 10 years just from one cycle. So the amount of money we've started spending is incredible. And I think that's another reason lawmakers are really paying attention.
Yeah, what a change, a big paradigm shift. And Dennis, are you amazed by how Bitcoin has grown? It's in the TradFi realm, in the political realm. It's everywhere now. I don't think people can ignore it anymore. And I don't see Jamie Dimon calling it a pet rock or a fad anymore.
Yeah, the anti-Bitcoin army, the anti-crypto army is down bad. I don't think they'll ever recover. I've been saying that I believe that we have left the golden era of being anti-Bitcoin and we have entered the golden era of being pro-Bitcoin. That was the pinnacle for them. There is just no way that they'll ever achieve such great heights to have people like Jamie Dimon and Elizabeth Warren and many others driving the conversation forward to oppose Bitcoin. Now, certainly there will be ups and downs. I'm never going to tell everybody that it's all sunshine and roses and rainbows for the rest of our lives, but there's just no way they ever achieve this level of opposition to Bitcoin again. I think we've broken down the dam, and it's sky's the limit for how far we can move in the next 2, 4, 6 years before we maybe enter another downwards. Things are just never all the way up forever, right? When it comes to politics. So I always tell that to people, keep that in mind and take advantage of the momentum while you can.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve on the federal level. So let's say everything goes according to plan. This bill is passed, signed into law. Do you think the first thing they will do is stop selling the Bitcoin they've confiscated and maybe move that supply over to the reserve balance sheet, so to speak, and then put the plan in place to start buying over? I don't know all the details. I honestly haven't read through everything, but maybe you can shed some lights there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the number one goal is right away is to get that Bitcoin that's currently held by the U.S. Marshals and move it into the Treasury. So that would be a really great down payment. I believe we're still at the 210,000 Bitcoin as of today that's held by the U.S. Marshals. Take that Bitcoin and move it into the Treasury and keep it. And never sell it. I mean, like hold on to it as long as you can, and then start purchasing Bitcoin so that we can get to the million. That's Senator Lummis's bill. She wants there to be a million Bitcoin in that reserve.
Hmm.
And I think we can get there. Now, it's of course over time. I think it's over 5 years where that Bitcoin is purchased. But they'll be doing it in a number of very creative ways. Some is to, I'm not the policy wizard on this stuff. The people that I've talked to them, it's very interesting stuff. But the basic premise is gold is not currently valued at the U.S. Treasury at today's value. It's valued like some old valuation.
Hmm.
And so what you would do is you would revalue the gold at today's current valuation and take that excess amount of value that you've just created essentially at thin air, even though it already exists, and use it to buy Bitcoin. That's one way that they're going to buy the Bitcoin. Now, Senator Lummis has also gone on record recently saying that we should sell the gold to buy the Bitcoin.
Hmm.
I think you're going to have a harder time politically getting that done, but all the cards should be on the table for how we be able to acquire Bitcoin. It's really, I think it's important probably we have a conversation about why a strategic reserve matters. Why do we want a Bitcoin strategic reserve? Because we can talk about how we're going to buy Bitcoin and it's great. And all of us Bitcoiners are like, yeah, big thumbs up. But I'm sure there are people listening into this who are just like, man, these guys are like, why? They're just pumping their own bags.
Right.
Certainly Bitcoiners will benefit, just like, real estate owners benefit when the government gets in and starts, allowing there to be super, super, super cheap interest rates to buying homes, or
Right.
gold holders benefit when the U.S. government buys gold, or the oil industry benefits when the United States has its own strategic reserve of oil. But let's put that aside for now and talk about the real strategic reasons why this type of reserve will benefit the U.S. The U.S. today already sits on a number of different reserves. I've already mentioned a few of them: oil, gold, but there's also agriculture, uranium, rare minerals. There's also medical supply reserves as well.
Hmm.
And we've seen what happens when we don't have enough reserves. Not that long ago, during the pandemic, there was a catastrophic impact from the lack of medical supplies. We had nurses wearing the same masks over again. They were wearing garbage bags over them to protect themselves. It was horrific. We did not have the supplies that we needed during that shutdown, during that pandemic, to be able to manage that type of a medical emergency, a medical crisis. So what would have happened if we did have the right amount of reserves? We could have avoided all of that type of catastrophe. So the government needs to be in a place to essentially to plan for these 50 or 100-year events or 200-year events to make sure that the American people are not dramatically negatively impacted. And we did not prepare well for the pandemic. And so we were very much hit hard at home because of that. Additionally, we have other types of reserves to help protect us from geopolitical risk. So the reason we have an oil reserve is because what if there's some sort of major conflict that breaks out all across the globe? We need to make sure we have enough oil so that we can be able to protect ourselves if a major war breaks out. Additionally, OPEC Plus has been very aggressive in the past. They've tried to push us around. And so we have a big, huge strategic oil reserve. And also, we generate our own energy here in the United States to ensure that we cannot be pushed around by our foreign adversaries or competitors or enemies or whatever word people want to use. Ultimately, having that oil reserve protects Americans at the pump and protects us from some sort of major conflict breaking out and us being put into a bad place. So same thing with Bitcoin. The reason why we need Bitcoin is to protect ourselves from fringe cases, really extreme economic outcomes. It could be the dollar collapsing. Well, if the dollar is collapsing, there's no better tool to have in your toolbox than Bitcoin. When the dollar goes down, Bitcoin goes up. We know this. This is how it's happened every single time. And the dollar is always continuing to go down at a certain amount, no matter what, all the time. Additionally, we can have Bitcoin act as a shock absorber. I talked about the medical supplies, right? That was somewhat of a shock absorber to have those medical supplies. We didn't have them. We weren't able to absorb the shock. If there is some sort of major currency devaluation, if there is some sort of major financial crisis, we can have Bitcoin as a tool to act as a shock absorber. Also, additionally, Bitcoin as a tool can act to protect ourselves against geopolitical risk. BRICS is getting bigger and bigger all the time. Yep. It's 40% of the world's population. They are now bigger as a GDP compared to the US. They have 30 trillion in GDP. We're at 27. Their purchasing power is 60 trillion. We're at 27 trillion. They have double the purchasing power that we have. They have 4 times the land mass that we have. Their resources are larger and more diverse. They're leading in iron. They're leading in gas. They're leading in gold. They're a major mineral exporter. They have major coal and agricultural infrastructure. So they're well positioned right now to move forward and to sort of become the new global order. If who knows if that'll happen for sure, but it could. And we need to make sure that we're hedging against that risk. I personally am very optimistic about the US. I think we're very good at pivoting at the right moment. And I think that Bitcoin is the right pivot. We need to pivot into Bitcoin now, and go out and secure our digital land grab, as some people have called it,
Yep.
and get there before others do, because everyone's coming to Bitcoin. This is happening. We need to take the step now to secure our future and make sure that we're protected against a lot of these geopolitical risks and give ourselves another shock absorber to defend ourselves against global catastrophe.
Yeah, great points and great explanation. And I think that's very important for people to understand because oftentimes they're just looking at price or they're just looking at headlines versus, hey, what's the reasoning behind all these things? And it's important to understand the ethos. Um, Bitcoin mining in the United States, we know that's been on the rise. Years ago, China banned Bitcoin mining. The miners went across the globe, and a lot came to the United States, down in Texas and other states. Donald Trump said he wants Bitcoin to be made in the U.S., so I'm assuming he's going to push for more mining. What are your thoughts? What are you hearing from the miners? And could that be, you know, a source of Bitcoin for the U.S. government if this reserve bill goes through?
I mean, sure, absolutely. Some people have thought that eventually the only way to get Bitcoin will be to mine Bitcoin, because Bitcoin will be in such high demand that, and the only people that have it are going to be or have access to it are going to be the Bitcoin miners. So there's certainly a strategic advantage to having Bitcoin here in this country. I mean, what was it just recently? I think Saylor bought like 4 times the amount of Bitcoin that was created over the last several months. Don't quote me on it, but there's more Bitcoin being bought than is being created. So that's eventually if this trend continues, we're going to run out of Bitcoin that's in the open marketplace. There will be no way to buy Bitcoin on an exchange. Some people legitimately believe that this is where we're headed. I think I've listened to these arguments. I like them. I'm not going to sit here and stake my claim on it, but we could head that direction eventually. And this is also another reason I didn't bring it up, but this is another reason why these strategic reserves matter, because Bitcoin mining, if we're headed towards this world where all the Bitcoiners are right. I mean, they have been right for a long time now. But if they continue to be right, it's the new global infrastructure, that Bitcoin mining is going to power our energy infrastructure, that Bitcoin mining is the only way to get new Bitcoin so that we can build our strategic reserve. Then protecting Bitcoin mining is going to be a pivotal. We're going to need to have additional tools to protect Bitcoin mining. And this is why it's really important that the US government gets in the game of buying Bitcoin, of being in the market to buy Bitcoin. Let's say one day China, Russia, BRICS, they all wake up and they say, you know what? Wouldn't it be great if we crashed the price of Bitcoin collectively so that we could ensure that the US mining fails, and so that we can pull in all the mining to where we're at. We want to get rid of the miners in the US. And this isn't completely outside the realm of possibility, especially given the fact that mining runs on razor thin margins. Most miners today are barely profitable, even in this market where we have nearly 100K Bitcoin. So it wouldn't take it's not a big drop. It would just be a sustained drop for, 6 to 12 months, where it's right below where these companies can survive. And these other countries that are our adversaries, they're smart. They're not stupid. They know what they're doing. They could come in, they could depress the price of Bitcoin, and then all of a sudden the US mining fails all across the country, and we're in a really bad spot. Because if 10 years from now, Bitcoin mining goes to the place that we think it will go, which means that it will be a major part of our energy infrastructure all across this country, all it would take is for them to jump in the market and try to depress the price of Bitcoin down enough to destroy the energy infrastructure that we've created. So that's why it's so important that the US be in the marketplace of buying and selling Bitcoin. Because if we're in the marketplace to buy Bitcoin in these bad events, they won't even try to do that, because they'll know the US government will step in and help to support the Bitcoin mining industry. So if you're a Bitcoin miner, I mean, strategic Bitcoin reserve is probably the most important policy issue that you can support. And in fact, I've actually already spoken to multiple Bitcoin miners, and some of the largest Bitcoin miners in the entire world, have already said that the Bitcoin strategic reserve policy idea is the most important policy for them. So we need to be getting this thing across the finish line, and we're driving it at the state level, but we're happy to see it happen at the federal level as well.
Dennis, are we in the hyper Bitcoinization that we've been hearing about for years? Are we in the midst of it with states looking to buy on the federal level, looking to buy countries, making it legal tender, countries buying, Wall Street sucking up as much of the supply into ETFs, companies putting it on their balance sheet? Obviously, MicroStrategy is an example, but there's also Metaplan in Japan. There's different things happening. Are we in the midst of this?
I think if we look back, hindsight's 2020. When our children look back, I think they will say that this was hyper Bitcoinization. When you're in the middle of it, it feels like it's happening too slowly. I would say that when people look back at this time in history, they'll say this was the beginning of hyper Bitcoinization. What else do we want? It's like we already have countries getting ready to buy Bitcoin. We have the U.S. government floating the idea of creating a strategic Bitcoin reserve. There's other players in the market, according to some rumors that I've heard are pretty credible. There's other nations already buying Bitcoin right now because they want to front run the United States. So what else there could be the sign that we're entering hyper Bitcoinization? Some people will say, well, all the purchases need to happen in Bitcoin. It's okay. Like, when is it going to be enough? Right? When is it going to be enough to say that we've entered a new era? And I think we entered a new era after November 5th, when a lot of the folks won their elections that were pro Bitcoin.
Yeah, absolutely. I was blown away by that. I didn't anticipate, that level of victory. And of course, the campaigning on that issue was incredible to watch. Now, with regards to the research you guys have been doing, tell us a bit more about that. And how are you sounds like, I think you mentioned earlier, you're presenting it to different government officials and so forth. And that research resonates more than, like you said, podcasts and someone writing an article or things like that.
Absolutely. I mean, listen, these lawmakers, they are very busy. They have very little time. Most of them, no time at all. And so if you are telling them, oh, you better go read this 50-page report, or you better go listen to this 5-hour long podcast, they're just not going to do it. They don't have the time. Lawmakers are thinking about the border crisis, the war in Ukraine, Gaza, a homelessness crisis, healthcare. That's just a start. And then you come in and you say, pay attention to Bitcoin, listen to my 2-hour podcast, read my 50-page report. They're just not going to do it. So what we do is we try to create shortcuts for these lawmakers to help them understand what we're trying to show them. We want them to understand it faster and to believe it faster. And that's why academic research, but particularly peer-reviewed research, is so important, because you do all of the heavy lifting, you do all the work, and then you submit it to a third-party group. Academic journals are a really great way to say, okay, someone vetted my work and said that it's real, not just me. Someone that's also very smart, multiple people, in fact, because what you do is, I'll go through the process. You write the paper, you submit it to the journal. The handling editor takes a look at it, says if it's good or not, and then sends it out for review. And the reviewers come, multiple usually, and they say, okay, these are the changes you need to make. You didn't do good work here. No. We don't like this. We do like that. And it is a little bit of a gatekeeping process. So you have, just like with policy, you got to take a bunch of shots, and hopefully you find some folks that'll, get what you're saying and understand it, because Bitcoin is so new. But once you get to the review process, then they publish it and it goes into the academic journal. Now, there are a variety of different academic journals. There's some at the low level and there's some at the high level. We started at the low level, just like how we started at the state level, because we wanted to achieve wins, prove that we can do it, and then move upwards from there. And we have done that. We were able to get it published in like 5 pieces in sort of low level journals. And then recently we got our paper to prove that Bitcoin mining is a powerful tool for mitigating methane emissions. We got that published in a top 2% journal. I mean, people were like blown away. They were like, how did you even do this? It's because we don't start at the top. Starting at the top is a bad idea in any industry, in any walk of life, any way of life. Anybody that's successful can tell you they didn't just show up at the top, unless like maybe their daddy got them $1 billion and paid for everything for them. But that's very, very rare. If you don't have $1 billion, which most people don't, you have to start at the bottom and work your way up in everything in life. I mean, that's like my ethos for life practically at this point. Um, so certainly academic works do provide a pathway for lawmakers to understand the benefits of Bitcoin and believe the benefits of Bitcoin without us having to sit down and talk to them. They won't even read. The funny part is they won't even read the paper. They won't read the academic paper. They just want to know, was it peer reviewed and how good was the journal that it got into?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you guys have addressed the Bitcoin energy FUD that has been going around for a long time. So it's really great. I don't hear that narrative anymore. And it's probably great to the great work you guys have been doing and putting out actual facts about the situation. So it's awesome. Um,
Thank you.
I know we're running up on time and you got to drop. So wrap up questions here. If you could create your own metaverse, what would the theme be?
I'm living in it. This is it. I love where I'm at right now. It's a great world we live in.
Rapid fire questions. Favorite food?
Ooh, it changes. I pivot regularly to different types of food. I think I'm on a burger. I'm on a burger. I was on a burger bender. Now I'm switching right now. I'm trying to figure out what the next thing will be.
Favorite musician or band?
Oh, um, you know, I'd have to say that I'm really into just motivational videos right now. I'm not a big music guy. I like stuff that pumps me up.
Sure.
So if I can get a good, rock talking to me about how I need to grind harder and wake up earlier in the morning, that's sort of what I listen to right now.
It's funny. I've listened to some motivational videos and yeah, some of from The Rock. So
He's always there. It's like The Rock, and there's a bunch of other guys, but that's the only name I ever remember because he's so popular. Yeah, it's like you whatever you've achieved is not great enough kind of stuff, right? So
oh yeah, for sure. Favorite movie?
Gladiator, and can't wait to see Gladiator 2.
Oh yeah, Gladiator is one of my favorites. Favorite book?
Ooh. I really liked I, I have only read it a couple times, but I really liked Zero to One. That was really good from Peter Thiel. But also, even though I didn't really love the book, Andreas Antonopoulos' Mastering Bitcoin book, like it's not a book that you would read to have fun. It's very technical.
Right.
But because I was so motivated to prove my friend wrong back in the day, I got this book so I could understand the interworkings of Bitcoin because I needed to understand how it functions to be able to know if he was right or if he was wrong. And I was like reading a foreign language, but I just grinded through it and did everything I could to. I read it like 4 or 5. It's like falling apart. I think it might actually be behind me somewhere. Um, but it's practically falling apart because of how many times I read it. And it, most Bitcoiners they don't learn the technical stuff early on unless they're a super technical person, which most of us aren't. But right away, I was like understood a lot of the fundamental inner workings of the technology, despite not being a technical person. So if I had to pick a favorite book just on its impact on my life, it'd probably be that one.
Hmm. Um, I'm ashamed to say I haven't read it, but I've watched Andreas's videos hours upon hours learning about Bitcoin back in the day. But I'll have to sit down and read that book.
He's
Finally,
great.
when you're not at the Satoshi Action Fund, what are you doing for as a hobby or pastime?
Oh, no time for hobbies now. I think I made my hobby my full-time job. So that's the dream, right? Like find your hobby and then make it your work.
Absolutely. Dennis, absolute pleasure. I really appreciate all the great work you and the folks at the Satoshi Action Fund are doing. And seriously, I mean, you're fighting on behalf of the industry, pushing Bitcoin adoption further and educating folks. So thank you so much for the great work you've been doing and thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me on, Tony, and looking forward to the next time we can chat.